For those of you wondering, this is former Pittsburgh Pirates pitcher Matt Capps. And yes, he is the man who ruined my childhood. Recently, I did some baseball reference surfing and found myself skimming through the Pirates teams of my childhood, when I stumbled upon an old enemy of mine, relief pitcher Matt Capps. For all the team struggles and personal anguish I'd suffered through watching my favorite team lose constantly, this man was the one who stuck out in my head as the worst of the bunch. The countless trips to my grandparents' house, having a nice dinner, playing some baseball ourselves, only to watch this 250-pound man step up to the mound and seemingly ruin it. However, when skimming over the once thought to be horrid baseball reference page, I quickly learned it was much different than I thought. Capps made his debut in 2005, grabbing his first cup of coffee in the majors to the tune of just 4 games, relinquishing 2 runs across 4 innings. I'm not going to pretend to know that Matt Capps even existed at this point, as I was only 3 years old. Flipping the calendar to 2006, this is where I got my first grasp of the Pirates roster, mainly through MLB The Show 2006, where my babysitter would abuse me with 39-year-old John Smoltz and a rather mediocre Braves team that felt like Murderers Row at the time. This is the list of names that were staples of my childhood, the Jack Wilsons and Freddie Sanchez's of the world, don't mind future Hall of Famer Jose Bautista, as well as my first ever favorite MLB player, Jason Bay. But this story isn't about them, it's about Matt Capps. 2006 was Capps' first true season in the majors and could have been where his reputation in my cranium got started. While his season stats weren't truly terrible, the 9 blown saves he acquired throughout the season was where his reputation started in my mind. The tricky part of the situation is, if he had not blown 8 of those 9 saves during day games, I would have never known or cared about them. But due to me having to watch the games at my grandparents' and normally needing to be home by dark, I never really got to see much of Capps. Unfortunately, there isn't footage available, but some important things to take away are that Capps had a decent season overall with a 3.79 ERA, spent most of his time as a middle reliever, and only blew leads during day games when I watched him, thus creating the image in my uneducated mind that he was terrible. Over the next 2 seasons, the Mad Capper went on a tear, pitching in 125 games, collecting 39 saves with a 2.58 ERA and a 3.21 FIP. Unfortunately, this version of Matt Capps doesn't exist in my mind. 2008 was my first taste of spitefulness for the Pittsburgh organization, as they had traded my favorite player Jason Bay to the Boston Red Sox. At the time, I was too young to understand the logic behind trading players for prospects, but all I knew was they traded my favorite player and that the Pirates weren't a team committed to winning, and the scapegoat came from none other than Matt Capps himself. Unfortunately for Capps, it all accumulated in that 2009 season. After 6 straight scoreless appearances, Capps found himself in some trouble against the San Diego Padres in the bottom of the 11th on April 24th. After surrendering walks to Chris Burke and David Eckstein, it set up Brian Giles to hit this walk-off single to start the downfall of Capps' 2009. The first half of May was equally as unkind to Mr. Capps. Starting on May 2nd, he surrendered 2 runs to the Reds before finally putting the game away. 2 days later, he squandered 2 separate leads versus the Brewers, the later of which was a 3-run homer from Ricky Weeks in the top of the 9th. May 15th saw another blown lead via the home run, this time to All-Star Bryant Haupt. From that point forward, Capps was able to keep his rap sheet relatively clean, not surrendering another lead until July 2nd. This is where Capps plunked current superstar Fernando Tatis Jr.'s father, who stole second and scored on a single later by Ryan Church. However, that wasn't even the low light of the season. That came 9 days later when Capps entered the 9th up 4 runs versus the Philadelphia Phillies. Capps' collapse started with a homer by Matt Stairs to right field, followed quickly by a walk by Jimmy Rollins and a single by Chase Utley. In stepped prime Ryan Howard, and you can imagine what happened next. But the Phillies weren't done there. Raul Ibanez tacked on a ground rule double to set up the winning run in scoring position, and after an intentional walk and a single off of Capps' behind, it set up Paul Bacco to send Philadelphia into a frenzy with a grounder to left to sew up the come-from-behind win over the in-state rival. 18 days later, Capps allowed another walk-off single, this time to Randy Wood of the San Francisco Giants, only to blow another game on August 9th, where he faced only 2 batters, allowing a home run and a hit by pitch before getting pulled. A month later, the Cardinals repeated their success against Mr. Capps, who allowed a game-winning homer to Albert Pujols in the top of the 10th, with his final blown save of the season coming 10 days later on September 15th, where Capps allowed a single to Matt Kemp, allowing Andre Ethier to score tying the game, which the Pirates later lost in the 13th inning. To say 2009 was the worst year we saw of Matt Capps would be an understatement. He finished the season with a career high in ERA at 5.80, as well as the career high in FIP, WHIP, hits per nine, and home runs per nine, all of which resulted in Pittsburgh cutting ties with the hefty righty, and Capps finding his way to DC to pitch for the Nationals. With the lack of internet and information at my disposal, you could have told me his career ended at that point, and I would have believed you. Unfortunately for my relationship with Matt Capps, that means I missed the pitcher's career renaissance. In 2010, Capps split time between the Nationals and Twins and finished the year with 42 saves and 48 opportunities with a 2.47 ERA and most notably an All-Star nominee. He was traded to the Twins at the trade deadline and helped them secure a spot in the playoffs before eventually losing to the Yankees in the divisional round. For the next 2 seasons, Capps' career petered out, finding it harder to get on a major league field with the Twins. Over the course of the 4 seasons after that, Capps bounced around minor league rosters from the Indians, Braves, and Diamondbacks, but unfortunately never found his way back to the major leagues. But how exactly did Matt Capps become the scapegoat for the pain the Pittsburgh Pirates caused me in my early childhood? Well, there were several things. For starters, he made a bad initial impression with all the blown saves in his true rookie season, along with a terrible lasting impression with his final season in Pittsburgh. Then, due to my lack of available resources, I was never able to see the success he had outside of Pittsburgh, but none of that was as important as the environment I was in. You see, the Pirates had a lot of bad players in that span of time, and even through it all, I looked upon them fondly. But through a stroke of luck, my brother, who had no care in the world for sports, managed to step in just in time for one of Capps' meltdown. From that day forward, my brother did big brotherly things and proceeded to annoy me about the player every single day. If the Pirates were winning, he went on about how Capps would blow it. If the Pirates were losing, it was about how Capps can't blow a game the team is already losing. And even though I knew he didn't care about sports whatsoever, the constant bantering about Matt Capps made a lasting impact on the player that has stuck with me in my head since early childhood.